What's up, my channel? It's your friendly neighborhood sassy blonde writer coming at you with another writing video. Today we are answering the age-old question, or at least maybe not answering, but definitely discussing the age-old question of, do your characters need to be likable? So the reason why I bring up this question is because I was recently going through some of my beta reader feedback, and there was one question that kind of struck a chord with me that I thought was really interesting. So let me go into the context first, then I'll go into the discussion. So it was like the first 10 pages of the book, and something bad was happening to my main character. The reason why it was happening was honestly the main character's fault. And that was completely intentional. It was a revenge type of situation on the main character. So something bad was happening to one of the main character's friends, and instead of standing up for them or trying to help afterwards, they passively kind of watched it happen and then didn't do anything to help afterwards. Not the best thing in the world to do. It was because they were afraid of getting in trouble. That friend, of course, the friend of the main character, of course, was mad, understandably. And so the main character tries to make it right, and then the friend kind of leads them on a little bit, gets a little bit of revenge when the main character's like, "Oh, why are you doing that? I tried to make it right." The friend is like, "Well, too little, too late. You ruined my life. I'm leaving you lost in the woods to die. Goodbye." And the beta reader said, "I kind of agree with the friend here. Your main character isn't very likable, so it's hard to feel pity for them." The beta reader ended up having to drop out, not for like other reasons, but all I could think was, well, yeah, you're not supposed to like her right now. She has a whole character arc. Right now she's a coward and she betrayed her friend. She sucks. But you can still feel bad for her because she's like about to die. And that got me thinking about like characters and character arcs. Because that was the other thing, was like the character supposed to start out as a coward and then transform into someone who's able to stand up for herself. That's like the whole point. Anyways, the comment about your character isn't very likable, so it's hard to sympathize with them or feel pity for them, it just really got to me because it was like, but they're still a person. I can not like someone, but still not want them to die. Anyway, so that's what kind of started me on this topic, and I want to make this a discussion, hopefully, on if your characters need to be likable in order for the audience to kind of root for them, if that makes any sense. I feel like when you start writing, it's the most common thing to do is to make a character that everyone loves, because it's human nature. We want everyone to like us. It's just like how we're designed. We want everyone to like us, we want to be popular, and that's usually where like the Mary Sue trope comes in. So I think that's part of the reason why I made this character kind of unlikable, was because I wanted to avoid a Mary Sue. And the Mary Sue trope comes in where like your main character is great at everything and everybody loves them, and it's like great all the time. And right now, particularly in YA, there aren't a lot of stories where the main characters aren't likable, or they do something that's wrong in the beginning of the story and learn from it. Also, in general, we're more tolerant of male characters who are unlikable than female characters who are unlikable in literature, or like in TV shows as well. So I think that's a bias that everybody should keep in mind in general. So since my video on does your story need a moral did pretty well, I thought I would take another stab at a similar type of question. Does your main character need to be likable for your book to be successful? So I guess my viewpoint on this, or my stance, would be, no, I don't think they do need to be likable for your story, whatever it is, your book, TV show, short story, novel, video game, whatever, to be successful. I do, however, think they need certain qualities that make them either relatable or admirable, and I'm gonna get into that in a little bit. Let me know in the comments down below, do you think characters should be likable? So one of my things would be, you can have a character that is super relatable, but also really unlikable, and the show will still be pretty successful. The difference between likability and relatability is often not discussed enough, especially when it comes to writing. I feel like people often conflate the two, especially when you begin writing, but there is a huge difference between someone being likable and someone being super relatable. You don't have to like someone to be able to relate to them. However, A lot of times people, if they don't like someone, will refuse to relate to them no matter what. Which is probably why a lot of times people will say, you have to make sure your character is likable, blah, 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 blah. Now, a common piece of writing advice thrown around is that your characters need to be relatable. And I definitely think that that is true. Because it's really hard to be invested in a character that you cannot relate to at all. That you cannot even root for at all. But there's a difference between being able to relate to a character, like on BoJack Horseman, where BoJack goes into a tirade saying honeydew melon in a fruit cup, or like when BoJack has a day where even when you try to do the right thing, it just doesn't pan out the way it was supposed to, and nobody says thank you. There's a huge difference between relating to something like that and liking a character or liking what they do. There's also something to be said about liking certain characteristics about them, like thinking that they're funny or thinking that they're really smart or really competent, but also not approving of the choices that they make in the story, like most of the bad decisions that BoJack makes. I think there's something to be said about being introduced to an unlikable main character that you can relate to, but you don't necessarily approve of what they're doing, or that you can also feel sympathy for, because you can always root for them to do better. There's also the trope of the lovable jerk, or the lovable a-hole. The trope of the lovable jerk is where someone's always like making fun of other people, always like super snarky all the time, but they're really funny and they kind of lighten the mood in tense moments. They're kind of fun to be around, lovable in a weird way. You don't mind the jerk a lot of the time. And for those characters, a lot of their traits pretty unlikable. I think a good example, at least in the beginning of the series, be like Lorelai Gilmore. At the beginning of the series, Gilmore Girls, she's a pretty selfish person, caters a lot to her own whims. She asks a lot of people and doesn't really seem to give a lot in return, at least the first couple of seasons. I mean, she gets engaged to someone on a whim and then she just kind of leaves there and has her friends tell everyone. And everybody loves Lorelai because she's fun to be around. She's funny, she's the life of the party. Isn't always the most likable person in the world doesn't mean she's not a compelling character to watch. Another thing is that just because they're not likable right off the bat doesn't mean you're not going to root for them to do better. I think that's the other thing. That's the entire point of the genre of the sympathetic villain trope. You feel sympathy for the villain, but you don't approve of their actions. You don't approve of whatever villain is poisoning Gotham's water supply this time. Just because you generate empathy for the character or because you relate to some of the things that they experience, or you think some of the things that they say are funny, doesn't mean that you necessarily like the character or you approve of the not so great things that they do. And I think that's an important distinction to make, and I think that's something that needs to be stressed when writing and also when you're reading critically. So back to the example I got feedback on that I mentioned before. Should we really like or approve of the choice that my main character made to let something bad happen to her friend when she had the power to do something? No, we shouldn't like that choice she made. It was cowardly. Should we feel bad for her that her friend didn't give her a second chance? No, because if I was in the friend's shoes, I wouldn't give her a second chance either, and I sure wouldn't forgive her either. And that's totally fair on the friend. However, it's completely relatable. Everyone has been in a situation where they're really scared of the consequences and they don't want to get in trouble. That they let something bad happen, even though, looking back on it, they definitely could have done something. And the consequences wouldn't have been that bad for them as they were for the friend who got in trouble or got hurt. Also, everyone has that moment where they try to patch things up with a friend and they have really pure and altruistic motives, and it was just too little too late. Friends didn't want to accept the apology. It was fair on them, but that doesn't make it sting any less. The feelings are still valid. That is relatable. May not make my character any more likable, but the situation that they were in is definitely relatable. That's all I got for you today, folks. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoy these kind of discussion-y type of videos, please like this video so that way I know you want to see me kind of debate with myself, I guess. If you have any thoughts on this topic, if you agree or disagree, that's fine. Let me know in the comments down below. Do you think characters should be likable all the time? Do you think they need to be? Do you think characters need to be likable? Do you think characters should be unlikable? Or do you think we need a good mix of both? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. Please remember to subscribe to my channel. I post new videos on Wednesdays. And of course, happy writing!